Hi, my name is Jim and I'm about to tell a strange story. I am currently in my second marriage. It's on its last legs and things are on a roll. There will be no third marriage. I've had enough of lying scumbags who don't appreciate what I give in a marriage. And from now on, I will never put myself in danger again. My first marriage was perfect, beautiful girl, fantastic in bed, and she loved that I was the breadwinner she could only dream of growing up in dire circumstances like hers. Well, I say perfect marriage, it was perfect until I discovered she was cheating. Very briefly, I thought about trying to patch things up with her, until 3 weeks later when I discovered that not only was she sleeping with my former best friend, but she was continuing to do so after being exposed. And to add insult to grave harm, she was sleeping with another guy who was filling in for her between dates with me and my best friend. This was Sarah, a real beauty, a beautiful and sexy body made for sex, if only she would sleep with me. Sarah, the former Mrs. Sarah Thomas, was a most suitable person despite her humble roots. And incredibly, even after I found out from my former best friend, as his parting gift to me, that he had not only slept with her for months, but had a second, more recent mistress. The stupid bitch thought I would ignore this scrappy information and we would have a happy ending. That opinion was dispelled in court when my divorce petition was accepted and the judge ruled that the second lover solidified my desire for divorce, and denied my wife's attorney's request for conciliation counseling. We have been married for almost 3 years, recently divorced, and outside of court, she came up to me, told me for the 300th time that she was sorry, that she only loved me, that she was a stupid girl, and asked me not to give up, and that she really hoped I would come to my senses, a few months would pass, and then we could try dating again. I threw her a look of utter disbelief and told her that it wasn't going to happen in this life or any other. She smiled a patient smile and said, "We'll see." Thus began the second period of my life as a free man, and I was in no mood to get into a serious relationship again anytime soon. I suppose I should introduce myself properly. My name is Jim Thomas. I'm 31 years old. My family is rich. My money is old. I've never been in financial trouble in my life. I'm a pretty big guy, confident and independently wealthy, thanks to my father who put me number 2 in the family business as a building contractor, a business that has made my family wealthy for generations. My position was just a title. Things were going well without me, but we had many invaluable employees who were the real reason for our success, and we Thomases were just figurines in a successful machine, the ones who pumped in the money that the business brought in. Someone has to do it, and at least we were good employers who paid good employees top dollar. The business was so successful and well-founded that unless my father or I made some ridiculous decision, the business continued to thrive. I also had as much personal time as I wanted. The business didn't rise and fall, whether I was in the office or not. Before I married Sarah, my father insisted on a prenuptial agreement so that if there were problems in the marriage, it wouldn't affect the family business. It was a great solution. As a kind of compensation for the prenup and my salary package, Sarah didn't have to work. Of course, the thought of eventually becoming a full-time mom was behind it, but for now, we were in no rush to have kids and wanted to enjoy the first few years of marriage before the huge changes that parenthood entails. So Sarah, in order to have regular adult interaction, took a part-time job, 3 half-day jobs 3 times a week, and her income was just a pinch for her. Guess who offered her such a perfect job? My best friend, no less. Yes, in retrospect, it all makes sense. Dan did us a favor by giving her an easy and undemanding job at his real estate agency. It was no more my fault for betraying her than it was for trusting my wife and best friend. If you can't trust those two, who the hell can you trust? Anyway, I happened to see their cars parked next to each other outside the hotel, and it was pure happy coincidence that life sometimes gives out to mess people up. I wandered around, and sure enough, they eventually got out together, kissed passionately, and went their separate ways. Later that afternoon, I called Dan and asked him to meet me at our favorite establishment after work. He was hesitant, and I'm sure he was while the bastard was sleeping with my wife. I explained to him how important it was and he agreed to meet. I arrived first and watched the door he eventually walked through. We smiled at each other like the friends we had been for so long, and as he approached me, I stood up and held out my hand for a handshake like I usually did. As soon as Dan's hand came out, mine closed and I punched him hard in the stomach, causing him to collapse to the floor. I looked down and he looked up, panting. Finally, he said, "Sorry, Jim." "Is that how you found out?" "Sorry, buddy. She's gorgeous and I just couldn't resist when she offered her to me on a platter. I know I'm your worst friend now, if you even consider me a friend at all. I'll tell you the exact and complete truth. If you divorce her, I'll confess what I did and you won't have to collect evidence. Unless, of course, you haven't already. Jim, I'm willing to do anything to get us through this. Eventually, when the bitterness of betrayal wears off, but knowing you, I realize this is a real Hail Mary." It was easy for Dan to suggest such a thing. He was single. There was no marriage to ruin, only mine. I decided to play along as I needed his cooperation, but he was dead to me right there, right then. That was the story of my first marriage when I was betrayed by two of my most loyal friends. I couldn't get over it, but later, I heard many similar stories and realized it wasn't that rare. I felt like Julius Caesar. My supposed friends were partial to me, stabbing me in the back time after time, and Dan went as far as he could pierce with his dignity. Time hurts, all heals. I've always liked that twist on the original statement, and in Dan's case, that was the case. Even after I kicked her out, Sarah, for reasons known only to herself, cut Dan off and his business began to stagger, as well as his reputation for seemingly ruining his marriage undermined his credibility in our small town, and thus, his business. Sarah, of course, no longer worked there. As much as I wanted to rain fire on her at first, and she did come out of the divorce with serious financial losses, I realized I didn't want to destroy her. I was above it and let her come out of the marriage suffering, but not broken, even though the prenup could have bankrupted her and ended her wasteful lifestyle. I wanted her to be full of remorse, not disappear into abject poverty, and she turned out to be just that, incredibly remorseful. I lost count of the number of times she found herself in the same places as me and never stopped trying to find a way to get back to me. It had become almost a game to me. I missed my wife, but I had long since lost my love for Sarah. Maybe not 100%, but more or less, and I was sure I was done with her. It wasn't her betrayal that I would never forget, nor would Dan remain dead to me, but then he didn't possess a beautiful girl, so Sarah remained in my life, albeit as a minor player. With Sarah, I found it hard not to give her false hopes. A cruel game perhaps, but no more cruel than a wife having fun with her husband's best friend. One memorable night, she had too much to drink, kept talking about wanting a reconciliation, and when I told her I wasn't ready yet, thinking to myself, and I never will be, she replied, "Well, how about you just sleep with me, no strings attached? I miss you so much." I was about to tell her, "Not in a bar, Sarah," but then I thought, hell, she's a great lay and I haven't had a steady source of sex since my divorce, so I generously drove her to the hotel. There was no way she wanted to go anywhere closer to my house, and slept happily with her for a few hours. Eventually, early in the morning, I left her there to sleep and headed home. I felt no obligation to her and certainly no obligation to wake up with her. Had she finished? I didn't know or care, but it seemed to me that she was done and, of course, I had done it several times and that was what mattered. She was enthusiastic, which amused me, and kept contacting me and meeting me casually, so I started having sex with her regularly when I needed it. Why not? I couldn't bring myself to hate her even though the love was long gone and she was certainly cool as myself. My former best friend and another asshole could attest. As they say in the best fairy tales, it was just sex and damn good sex. The thing is, some people who didn't give a shit about her sex got it, but once they got it, I couldn't blame them for coming back for more. It was spectacular. Speaking of the bastard who slept with her, I really thought he deserved to have something bad happen to him. The problem was that if I gave him a few broken limbs, it could damage not only my life, but also the family business. So for the time being, he remained at large, just as long as he didn't attract my attention again. Those readers whose lives didn't work out, if the one who ruined your life and your wife's life isn't suffering greatly, will be glad he got what he deserved in the end. The only problem was that I liked the marriage theory, so in a little over a year, I fell in love with a beautiful red-headed woman who I began to believe could be exactly what I needed, an attractive woman who could actually respect me as a partner and possible husband. Jessie wasn't as beautiful as Sarah, but she was still damn good-looking, had a great personality and importantly, was also hot on the tongue. As it turned out, sexy as hell, but damn, I'm getting ahead of myself. Our courtship was long, several years due to my trust issues, but eventually Jesse and I married and happiness returned to my life for a while. We had 3 very happy years when that darn fate intervened again. You may remember that when I discovered Sarah and Dan at the hotel, it was pure coincidence. I was driving by and noticed their cars. Oddly enough, this time it was Dan, that roguish bastard, who enlightened me. He remained a minor figure in my life, no longer a friend, but he knew what was going on in my life, just as I knew most of what was going on in his. It's a pretty small town, hard to keep secrets in, as my ex-wife and soon-to-be second wife found out to their misfortune. Jesse had one of those stupid individual license plates on his car, just one. I guess if you're dumb enough to cheat, being dumb enough to do it with an individual license plate isn't that hard, and yes, it turned out Jesse was that dumb. Dan said he missed our friendship and wanted to do me a favor when he saw her car outside the same hotel where he slept with Sarah. Like I said, it wasn't that big of a town, so the odds weren't great, but I'd never liked the place, and that's probably why my 2 wives thought it was a safe place for me not to show up. Of course, as with Sarah, my father said that a prenup was required before marrying Jesse. And of course, after my first experience, I wouldn't get married without one. Jesse didn't expect me to be so forthcoming and even said, "You'll never need one. I'll never do what Sarah did, so I'll sign it to make your father happy." We negotiated terms that were a little more favorable than Sarah's, but not by much, and all important assets like the company and my house were protected. Included in the agreement was a fidelity clause stating that if the marriage ended this way, she would receive 5% of our assets, not 25% if the marriage broke up for any other reason. Given my family's wealth, that extra 20% amounted to hundreds of thousands, approaching a 7-figure sum. This time, I wasn't going to get the evidence on a platter, so I hired a private investigator. A few weeks later, I got the evidence I expected, but hoped it would just be an explainable reason for her presence. After all, not everyone who uses hotel services cheats, but photos, video, and audio confirmed the worst. I won't bore you with the details of the equipment, how the private investigator got it installed, and how much he paid the front desk staff. He had irrefutable evidence, and for me, the expense was a drop in the ocean. Once again, I was an insensitive cuckold, and once again, I didn't put up with it. I had promised at the beginning that this would be a strange story, and here I was breaking the news to Jessie that her life was about to change. The confrontation was bizarre. She was quoting straight from the cheater's manual, thinking she'd convince me that it was just sex, no love, that she hadn't taken anything from me, only love, all with the help of a few tears. The only thing I really believed was that aside from the abstract love of sex, she really only loved me, but so what? My wife can't have sex with other people and still be my wife. She knew what happened to Sarah. I told her I didn't want to know the circumstances, who he was, if there were others. There were not even why. I didn't even care why. I just told her that she would soon be my ex-wife and that she had a week to get herself and her things out of my house. You've already realized that I'm not one for grand gestures. I just took it all in and never once deviated from my original thought that she would be leaving at the end of the week. For several hours, stretching over several days, she tried to convince me to forget about it and stay together, and then she said the following. "Jim, one of my lovers slept with your wife for the second time." I only threw her a "so what" look that said I didn't care how often he slept with her. I let what she said to me pass by my ears. I mean, he also slept with Sarah, Jessie enlightened me. I know it shouldn't have mattered. When I found out Sarah was a cheater and a liar, I knew she was being pleasured by a second bastard, but it was my best friend who I blamed so much that I didn't even recognize the second guy's name. Now that I had clearly slept with my second wife, this was too personal to leave it alone. I had to take action. Maybe the guy didn't even know who I was. Maybe we just had similar tastes in girls. But damn it, if I remarried, would he soon sleep with her looming in front of him like a rat in a gutter too? No. Something had to be done about it. Jessie, tell me his name and everything you know about him. Jessie didn't want to say anything, so I told her that if she had any chance of staying married to me, she would tell me everything she knew about him. I found out that my newfound nemesis is George Dolan, married with 3 kids, but a serial cheater. The odds of him sleeping with only 2 of my wives were about the same as winning the lottery. And statistically, he'd have to be up to his ears in half of our town's female population to get 2 wives of the same guy. A hell of a charming bastard. I wanted his figure hanging on my wall like a hunting trophy, or maybe pin his head and shoulders to the baseboard by the fireplace. The plan matured. Jessie, I want to divorce you for being trashy, but I know you like the lifestyle I'm providing you, so I want to offer you a deal. Are you interested? She replied that she was, and here's what I offered. I will stay married to you for 1 year with probation, and on condition you will assist me in my scheme to ruin George Dolan's life. And if you fail to fulfill any part of it, the trial will end and so will our marriage. You'll move your stuff into the guest bedroom, we won't sleep together, and we won't have sex for the next year. I will sleep with whoever I want and you will be celibate for 12 months, and if you do that, we might have a chance. If you make it through the 12 months of celibacy, I'll think about where we go from here and we might stay married, but after that, you won't have a chance again. I'll buy you as many sex toys as you want, but if you break this vow of celibacy, I'll throw you out the door and whatever you're wearing at that point, and you'll have a fraudulent version of a prenup. Sure, I'll put a tracker on your car and you'll give me access to all your electronic devices with no passwords, plus I'll hire a private investigator to follow you from time to time, but you won't know when or for how long. She agreed right away. I knew she wouldn't go a year without spreading her legs for someone, so I was sure I'd be rid of her cheating as soon after she helped me in my little revenge plan. The plan was simple. She would arrange an afternoon of comfort with Mr. George Dolan at the hotel I hated more than any other, and I would have my private investigator set up cameras to record their sex. I wasn't interested in whether the case would hold up in court. I needed visual videotapes to give to Mrs. G. E. Dolan. God help the poor woman. I told Jessie that the videotape would be doctored to blur her face in all the shots, and I also told her to remember that this would be her last time in bed with anyone for 12 months, so to hell with it. By all means, go ahead and make the most of it. So she did, and surprise, surprise, Mr. Dolan turned out to be a very large guy, red hair and a mass of freckles. And not only did he look Irish, he had a tirade and a florid voice that made him look more Irish than Blarney Stone. Yes, I watched the video, but I remembered that, as with Sarah, I had lost all love for Jessie. I felt no excitement, no disgust, not even anger. I had proof that I should destroy the bastard's wife. I was absolutely ecstatic about the whole thing. If I hadn't been infuriated by the second cheating wife, I probably would have regretted ruining the lives of Mrs. Dolan and her 3 children. But at that moment, they were just collateral damage, and he was about to experience maximum pain. It took about a week before my private investigator came through with an edited video hiding Jessie's identity and showing enough to convince his wife, but not enough to tarnish her for life, and without all the nonsense he'd said about her being trashy in bed and a few derogatory remarks about her in general. Interestingly, neither of them said anything like that about me, a faint consolation, but this guy was with my wife, so screw both of them. I called Mrs. Dolan one afternoon, and sparing you the details, I'll tell you that it wasn't the first time she'd heard of his cheating. Last time, she would have shown him the door and told him not to beat his ass when he left, but they were really from Ireland. She had no family or support, and with 3 kids, she hoped he would learn his lesson. Obviously, apart from him, she was very upset. When I told her that this was the second wife of mine he had screwed, she laughed and laughed at how weird it was. I almost joined her, but it was too painful for that. Mrs. Dolan, call me Josephine, was also something of an Irish stereotype, but her hair was red, but not red. It was an ombre color, and she had sharp blue eyes, and she looked great. What kind of a jerk was George? Yes, Sarah was extraordinarily beautiful, as was Jessie, but Josephine was something else. The more we talked, the more I realized that if she divorced George, it would be incredibly difficult for her to raise 3 children. Sympathy made me decide that I would try to help her. Other than that, we were just talking, but I really enjoyed her company. Reflecting with little Jim, I thought about what it would be like to put George in his place and sleep with his beautiful wife, since my contract with Jessie allowed me to sleep with whomever I wanted for the next 12 months. Epilogue, 6 months later. Josephine filed for divorce and vowed to make serial cheater George pay harshly, but she loved her children enough not to make it hard for George to raise them and kept him in their lives. I did help her out. I paid for her to work for our company as a secretary and quietly paid her a little more than she needed, and that was enough to cover the mortgage and household expenses. Plus, I gave her office hours so she could make sure the kids were properly taken care of. A couple times, I took her out to dinner. A couple times, we had excited faces, but in the end, I never found wife number 3, and so I did the right thing by telling her we had no future, and why not? But I wanted her to stay at her job, and we were just friends. Epilogue, 1 year later. During the period of supposed celibacy, Jessie tried many times to sway me towards a decision, but I never once flinched. Indeed, one night, 6 years after the divorce, Sarah, who had never given up thoughts of reconciliation and with whom I had slept with periodically before marrying a second time, came to see me. That night after a nice dinner, I brought her home and slept in my bed with her all night. Jessie must have been aware of what was going on, and in the morning, I made sure she was aware of Sarah's presence. She came into the kitchen for breakfast and saw Sarah and me devouring croissants and coffee. I was happy. Breakfast with 2 cheating wives, you can't beat that. I know Jessie took it particularly hard. She was the architect of her own problems. However, to my amazement, as far as I could tell, and given my private investigator's presence for 2 weeks a month for the first 6 months and weeks here and there for the next 6 months, there was absolutely no indication that Jessie had been cheating for the past year. I almost felt sorry for her when I told her that despite a year of celibacy, what she had done had killed my love for her and that she was never coming back. I served her with divorce papers, but gave her a 25% guarantee that the divorce was for reasons other than infidelity. Many of you will call me a simpleton, but I never hated her or Sarah and could afford to be generous. I saw the divorce as her reward for keeping her legs shut for a year. I know I'm just an old softy, but despite their infidelity, I just didn't want to ruin the lives of any of my exes.